When it comes to setting up your program or changing your program around, there's three main pillars that you should consider: volume, frequency, and intensity. In my previous videos, I've discussed volume and intensity. In this video, I'm going to discuss my philosophy and thoughts on frequency. So the three pillars are all interconnected in certain ways. I'd say volume and frequency are probably the most connected, as they have a big sort of overlap in why and how you do things. What frequency do we want to set for our program and for certain muscle groups? So muscle protein synthesis, or essentially muscle growth that occurs from after you do a certain exercise in the gym, lasts for a certain period of time. The newer you are, the longer this is going to last. So for absolute beginners, you have days and days after you stimulate muscle growth for that. The process keeps on going. The more you train, the more this lessens, and it drops down to shorter periods of time before your body is fully reset and isn't growing any more muscle. In this case, frequency quite depends on your level of training and your training history. So if you've just started, train as infrequent as possible per week. Like I said with volume, the general idea with volume is we want to do as little as you can to make progress, and it's the same here. It's connected and similar here with frequency. We want to do as little as you can, as little as you can to begin with, and then it's a lever you can pull to add more as you need be and as you can. There is a balance to be achieved here, because every training session of a certain muscle per week is a new muscle growth opportunity per week. Whereas if you were only training a muscle once per week, that's 52 opportunities per week. Two sessions training that muscle a week doubles your opportunities for muscle growth over a year. Triples your opportunities. So the frequency, increasing frequency is obviously good because it gives us more opportunities for muscle growth, but there is a balance to be achieved here, and there's things we need to balance. Why not train a muscle group 7 times per week? There's a few factors that would dissuade this. First is time constraints. Realistically, as I've discussed in I think both my volume and intensity video, muscle growth is a slow process physically. It's not going to happen overnight. Not even the most genetic freak won't put on 50 kilos of muscle in 1 month. So there's only so much you can physically grow, meaning that it's going to be a long game, really, on the terms of years or decades that you're going to be training for muscle growth. And most people, in fact I would say almost everyone, unless you're specifically working in a personal trainer type job, they have other stuff going on in your life. It might be okay to train, be in the gym 7 days a week for when you're in college or high school or something like that, but realistically you're not going to be able to maintain that across your whole life, because other responsibilities and commitments are going to come up that you won't be able to maintain that. So number one factor to consider is time constraints. Can you actually maintain that? In fact, I would say most people probably can't. The second factor to consider, which is a very important factor, is your joints. Your joints and connective tissues don't recover as fast as muscles generally. If you try, while you may be able to do a certain amount of volume heavy on your first session, first of 7 sessions a week, and the second session but like as you go on doing this, you're just putting more strain and tension on your joints and connective tissues with these loads, and eventually it's going to come to a point where you put so much tension and strain on your joints that you're going to get injured. So while theoretically it's nice to say we could do it, but your recovery of joints and connective tissues will not keep up. This is also the case even if you go light. Joints and connective tissues will still be irritated if you are working a muscle like seven times a week. There's just no two ways around it, and you ultimately will end up like hurting yourself. It's kind of similar if you're doing too much volume. There's only so much that your body can take, and if you keep trying to give it more and more and more, eventually something will snap. So frequency and volume are heavily connected. There's a minimum amount of volume generally that you're going to want to do per session to actually see progress. While like there's been a big trend of like the Mike Mentzer style thing, like going one set per session, realistically that's not gonna give you sustained progress over the long term. There's generally a minimum amount that for your level of progress you will need to do to sustain progress and sustain growth. So we want to be hitting this minimum level, otherwise going in and training below this minimum level is useless. It's not going to help us progress because we're not hitting the right level of stimulus in that session to progress. So in that case, we want to do as many sessions per week as we can, each session doing as much volume as required is for us to make progress in and receive a good enough stimulus to make progress in that session. So what does this generally look like? Generally it's going to be training a muscle group 2 to 3 times a week, so that each session you're getting above the required level for an adequate stimulus to provide progress and growth, while also accounting for, once you've got to that level, you obviously need to give yourself time to recover, and in general it's going to be result in that it's going to be maybe 2 to 3 days depending on your personal recovery capacities. Everyone's different. Some people take longer or shorter to recover, but you're going to base your frequency of that muscle group then on its capacity to recover from each session, being that session was enough volume to provide an adequate stimulus for growth and progress. So what does this actually mean for your frequency? That was kind of mumbly jumbly theoretical ideas. Realistically, aim for 2 to 3 times a week, training a muscle group, doing as little volume as you can to progress from one session to another, and making sure that you're recovering from one session to another. So if you try to do 3 sessions for a muscle group a week and it's just not long enough to recover, drop down to 2. And if you find you are recovering perfectly well, like days before 2 sessions, go up to 3. If your schedule and time constraints allow that. So this has been my thoughts and philosophy on what way you should set up your frequency when it comes to programming. In my previous videos, I've covered volume and intensity, so that's all 3 of the main pillars that I think you should consider when setting up or changing your program. In future, I'm going to continue on this sort of train and discuss more things that can come into play and that you may want to consider when setting up different variables and different things in your program. If you want to see those and don't want to miss them, make sure you hit subscribe.